Hi, I'm Willowbrew, and I really like drawing for explaining concepts. I call this Vizthink. I'm sure other people have similar names for it, but we're going to talk today about what it's good for, because the more people we have expressing their ideas in more ways, the more things we can do together. So Vizthink is good for a number of different things, but let's start with charts, detangling ideas, telling stories, and showing systems. I'm going to leave all the errors in this so that you can see what the process is like. So here's an example of a chart. You might lay out what a design is. So in co-design method, we have value-based design, where you start with an impact, which is the lasting change you would like to have. Then you talk about the outcomes, the little bits that get you there, the outputs that get you to those changes, and then the inputs, what you need. And while you design this way, you also implement this way. And this one drawing was taken from several paragraphs of text that people could take all sorts of various meanings from. Similarly, you can find charts to be humorous. While not a funny story, I find this as an amusing graph. The amount of time that it takes me to go to sleep, regardless of how close I am to dubstep, based on the number of dubstep-centric camping trips I've been on. Likewise, we can talk about detangling ideas. Here we have people trying to keep up on what everybody is doing and writing it all from scratch, rather than using this beautiful thing we have of RSS in order just to implement what other people are up to. This shows a referencing off into other things while still having a presence of it, and this is just the cluster of something that's going on. Likewise, we can build a story. So here is from James Rojas talking at the co-design studio. We have someone who lives in a city and experiences it, and then someone who plans a city but doesn't really know what people want and how they want to live in their city, but is happy to fulfill that desire if they could just express it. But people are wary of doing that because they don't think they have the expertise to. One of the dividing factors in this are the different approaches between them. And so you have artists versus city planners in if 10 people show up to your event, how they feel about it. And so this presentation, you see, goes through the story of how people interact despite these dividing factors, how they come together around objects in order to explore what they want out of their city, and then what they end up doing, and what expectations you need to set, things like that. So how does this actually play out? After you get some practice in doing this, if you listen to people give their talks or their lectures and see how they start making their points, they'll either give you nodes of an argument and they'll move from point A to point B to point C, versus people who end up layering the ideas and showing how those layers interact. Here's an example of independent nodes in a talk, and how people were expressing different aspects of the same sort of thing. Same here. This is an example of Charlie Tatar's research. Charlie is amazing. But when we first talked about this, or when he first gave his PhD talk, I still saw it as a bunch of various nodes around similar ideas. So you have collaborative design projects in the collaborative design area, and you have group-centric sharing models over here. And I think that I could have drawn this better now, having a better understanding of the topic and also being more experienced at Vizthink. But how this sometimes ends up looking when people layer things is, let's look at this. This was a presentation at Facing History and Ourselves, and it was talking about how, this presentation was talking about how the overwhelming stereotypes and expectations affect parts of your brain that have a limited amount of ability to respond to things. And so when you constantly have to respond to stereotyping, it wears down that self-control, which means that how you think of yourself and therefore how you act changes. And so you're so overwhelmed by how society sees you. The conversation you have is informed so much by the threat of stereotypes that you instead end up balancing that when the other person might just be trying to talk about a subject. So in this, you see the layering of ideas, how they've kind of stacked in on each other. So what we're going to do today is go through the act of creating a Vizthink. You're going to get a bunch of Post-it notes, and take 10 minutes to draw through a talk that you've seen or are about to give, or an idea that you've been trying to think through, a project you've been trying to think through. And you're going to put one idea on each of those pages. Now, if you're having trouble figuring out what to draw, or if most of your post-it notes have just words on them, keep in mind that thinking visually is a learned skill. And some people do it more easily than others, but it's definitely something that I had to learn, so I assume you will too. One thing that I like to do is think about what an analogy for the interaction that I'm drawing is, which means something like, if I'm thinking about how an idea happens or how I come to better understand something, then maybe it's the analogy of a light bulb coming on so that I can better read a book. I need this context in order to go forward with my project. One reason we set this time is because we don't want you to dive in too deeply. It's really easy to show a really broad system that is not linear in constructing these visualizations. And so by setting a time limit, you're sure to focus on what you think is important. If you end up spending 10 minutes on a tangent and giving a great level of detail, then that's fantastic. Many of the presentations that I give are on the same background drawing with an immense amount of detail, and then I tell one short cohesive story arc through that mess. And that's a way of showing how much more content is out there, how much more complete the picture is, how many facets there are. For anyone who cares to go on those tangents with me, I'm prepared and excited to do that. But right now we want to make one story, and so we're going to take 10 minutes to do that. And so you're going to lay out one point on each post-it note to start. One idea per page, one component of this story, of this talk, of this project. Now that you've had a chance to draw one component per post-it note, you're going to lay them out. So you're going to see how the different components might interact. Does one thing need to be closer to the other because it has a relationship to it? Does it lead to it? Is it related in some way? And this way we start to see how things are interacting. So with an analogy, it becomes a little bit less abstract in what you might be drawing as an interaction or as an indicator of change or whatever else. Another great project is the Noun Project, which is a website that has iconography that is free and open source. So take another 5 minutes to lay out your post-it notes and think about how they interact with each other, the ideas on them. And you might layer your post-it notes to describe a transition. You might draw an arrow between two of them to describe a movement. Try rearranging them. See how that helps. Try different transitions. So pause and take that time. And now that we've taken the 5 minutes to do that, we're going to constrain it to a piece of paper. This forces you to think about it in a bounded way. So take out an 8x11 piece of paper and redraw your components on it. You can reposition your post-it notes on it at first, but it's good practice to try drawing through it again. Here, obviously, I'm cheating because I'm using a digital format, so erasing and moving is easy. But here we have walking into a dead light bulb, turning it on, seeing the light, being able to read a book, and therefore being lovely. And now that you've drawn it out, tell the story of what's going on in your drawing. Tell it to someone nearby you, type it out, talk about it. See, my people, not always proportional. I'm no great artist. But I do have fantastic blue hair, let's be honest. So you'll notice that I'm using a bunch of tools in this, and it's not just about post-it notes and pieces of paper and Sharpies. There are other ways of also doing this. And my toolkit is this program itself that I'm drawing in, which is called Adobe Ideas. And there's also the thing that I'm drawing with, which is the stylus. And then I took this recording by projecting via Air server from my iPad to my laptop, and then I used a screen capture program in order to record the process of that projection. So I'd love to hear what it is you made. You can find me on the internet as Willow Blue, and let's go make things. Find another way of telling your story. This is exciting. Bye.